r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. What's the creepiest display of intelligence you've seen by another human? I knew a lady who counted pills in a pharmacy basically her entire life. One time she looked at a container of ibuprofen that was supposed to have 100 pills in it and said it looked off. She recounted and it had 99 pills in it, one less. My mind was blown. I knew a guy who worked retail and was able to memorize customer credit card numbers. He used them to buy pornography. A friend once showed me his guidebook to how to handle his girlfriend. He'd taken notes on her likes and dislikes, what he'd given her, and precisely how she responded, which actions caused which responses in her, what phrases he could quote at her to yield particular responses, etc. And then sort of used the information he'd collected to write a little guide to expected outcomes of various things he does, so that he could defuse her if she got mad at him. If she felt unloved, he had strategies for fixing the situation, so he could go back to doing whatever he likes while she gets off his back. If X, then Y will likely do Z, unless P. It was somewhere between oddly sweet and creepily manipulative. In real life, my sister, hands down, and it's an ongoing thing. You remember that scene in The Matrix where Carrie-Anne Moss downloads helicopter flight knowledge into her brain? Watching my sister just go about her daily life is like a never-ending loop of that scene. Dishwasher is broken. 10 literal minutes of YouTube later, she's got it figured out. The what, the how, the why, and it'll be fixed in half an hour if the parts are in stock at Lowe's. Car making a funny noise. Get her on FaceTime, pop the hood, crank the engine, and she's got it located and ID'd, and estimates from 3 local shops for you to pick from. Random archaeological discovery mentioned in passing on the daily MSN headlines. She read the journal article already, and isn't it interesting how that validates so and so's findings from his dig in Chile in the 80s. Bitch, since when do you know about fossils? Crazy complicated super esoteric recipe from Thailand she's never tried? I'll bet you $1,000 she'll glance at the recipe twice and whip out a version you could sell in a restaurant. She remembers your co-worker's sister's boyfriend's birthday and that he really likes chocolate sprinkles but not rainbow. She can get a feral dog eating out of her hand and get it to let her give it a bath and diagnose what's wrong with its back leg from 10 paces away. Hey C's, do you happen to know anything about welding? How to preserve this old dress I found in great-grandma's attic? What I should do about these weird bugs on my tomato plants? Of course you do. Her boss is at work. Keep trying to move her up the chain, but she's not interested because it'll cut into her jam making time or something. But they all come to her first when there's a question or a problem they can't fix, and they listen on the first go. Her husband says he's seen her ask the general manager what flavor of stupid he ate for breakfast this morning, and seen him apologize for the error in judgment. She'll tell you she's not that smart, she just has a good memory, but I don't know man. It's terribly handy to have her on my side, but if she ever decides to take over the world, we're all screwed. I worked with someone briefly when I worked for the police. He came to my team to get frontline experience for promotion. He'd been in a secretive investigation unit before coming to us. I'll call him Dave. We went into this area with loads of gang-on-gang violence and we were enforcing a Section 60 stop for weapons after a nasty murder in the area. We stopped 2 men at the side of the street and it was immediately obvious they had nothing to do with any of it. We chatted for a bit and that was it, or so I thought. Dave, being incredibly polite and friendly, said to one of the men, "I think I know you." The man said that he didn't. He'd never been in trouble with the police, never been arrested, never gets in any bother whatsoever. He was in his 30s, this fellow. Dave said, "I do know you, let me have a look at you." The man was good-natured about it, even though I was feeling bloody awkward. "I've never been in any trouble," said the man. Dave looked at him and said, "I believe you haven't." "Your dad did though." He calls the man by his name, his date of birth, his old address, his mum's name and date of birth, and his dad's details too. Dave says that 22 years previously, he'd attended at the bloke's house when he was a preteen because his parents were arguing and his dad was drunk. His dad was arrested for a minor sleep-it-off breach of the peace. He wasn't a regular criminal or anything like that. Dave had not only recognized the guy, but he'd done it from when he was a child, aged him, and remembered every bloody detail for a minor thing over 20 years previous. No wonder he was in the high-end investigation units. Genius. Not creepy, but I knew a 14-year-old who was helping his dad drywall a home. The kid looked at the shape of a staircase, looked at the drywall on the horses ready to cut, looked back at the staircase, then cut the drywall without a single measurement or marking. The drywall fit the staircase so perfectly, it slid into place like it was snuggling the stairs. Not a single measurement. When I was in med school, I was tangentially friends with a guy who never showed up to uni at all. Skipped all lectures, called in sick for all lab and tutorial sessions. The night before second year finals, he was around my house and said he had spent the last week watching every lecture at double speed. Dude placed top 10 out of 300 students in every exam. And mind you, it wasn't just he remembered everything, but he had a functional, lateral applicable knowledge of all the stuff we had to know, much better than most people who actually showed up. I always shuddered to think that if he applied himself he would be a monster of a man, but dude was content to just chill. I had to learn collegiate level German in the military, which was a 9-month class. We started off with 15 people and graduated with 6. It was really hard, and I barely made it through. The top kid in my class was basic white kid from Indiana who had already tested out with top scores in Spanish and Portuguese in a matter of weeks. He not only knew those languages perfectly fluently, he could switch dialects fluently between like the Dominican Republic and Spain, or Brazil and Portugal. His story was, the schools were scheduled for a specific length of time, with a report date already set. That was kind of far out, so the Defense Language Institute, our school, kept throwing languages at him. He figured that out and started taking his time in class, but like halfway through German, he turned in a science fiction book that he had written to our teachers, completely in German language. Then they put him in Arabic, then Farsi, which were each 1.5 year long schools on their own. So in the 9 months I was there to learn how to read, write, and speak German, which already had an expected high failure rate, he did the same for Spanish, Portuguese, German, Arabic, and Farsi, including different dialects, accents, wrote a couple books. Before he came he said he knew some Spanish from working construction after high school and liked the idea of becoming a linguist, but had never tried actually learning before. Besides languages, he seemed extremely normal, but no one knew he was writing books. We already had like 4 hours of homework every night. It was insane. Edit to add. We were friends, and I asked him his method. He said his favorite way to learn was to take songs he knew in English and then translate them into the new language. The trick was he wouldn't translate it word for word, he would learn about the people and say the lyrics how they would say it. How he figured that out, I have no idea. Just the first time I witnessed someone with a special interest in real life. Was a school assistant and had been asked to walk around outside the school with a specific 13-year-old kid who needed a 10-minute stress relief break. It was a school for kids with anxiety and depression. Anyway, we are walking and a plane goes by overhead pretty low to the ground. In a super casual tone of voice, that kid starts telling me the heading of the plane, which airport it came out of, based on how low it was, and its probable flight number and destination. Not exactly creepy, but I had a friend who failed maths at school. When presented with a selection of alcoholic drinks, even with hundreds of types, he could instantly work out the alcohol content, volume, and price to determine which would get him drunk the fastest. Not creepy, but my high school algebra teacher apparently had the textbook memorized. We were doing work in class by ourselves, and struggling with a problem. "What page and what problem number?" he asked. He then proceeded to write the problem out in the board without referencing the book. Blew our high school minds away. I had a friend from childhood who had an eidetic memory. He never forgets anything. At primary school, he had a lot of problems because he couldn't accept that people forgot stuff, and nobody had any idea that he had this ability. So if anyone got a detail wrong or something like that, he would think they were lying or trying to trick him and freak out. Wasn't till he was 15 or so that people realized what was going on. I knew a guy who could remember everything he ever read, but that's not the creepy part. Creepy part was how he wouldn't tell you. So he didn't like telling people because it becomes a game for people. What is the fifth word of the second paragraph on page 93 for this book? So anyway, anyone knew, he just wouldn't tell them up until they pissed him off. Then it was like a court drama. On January 16, 2007, you said that John and Jane were seen flirting at the coffee shop and, quote, "OMG, John is cheating on Mary with Jane again." Look through past messages, and sure as shit, the message would say that. Anyway, dude was super smart, but really jaded and depressed. Fell out of touch, so I don't know what he's doing now. Shortly before my ex-wife and I separated, she stated that she had ran all of my friends and family away from me intentionally over the years. Not because she hated them, but because if the day came where she decided to kill me, she would have time to dispose of my body and leave the country before, or if they noticed I was missing. By that point I hadn't talked to any of my friends or family for almost a year and a half, so they wouldn't have known for a good while, thinking I was still just ignoring them because of her. My ex remotely took over the computers of 7 people using the same Wi-Fi and was able to make it look like the illegal images he was looking at were never on his computer. We lived in a duplex and they let us use their Wi-Fi. It wasn't until years later I realized what he had done. Sometime before this, I had come home and walked into our room to find him and the computer of one of the neighbors on his computer. I saw a network map of all the computers in both houses. I confronted him, and he gaslit me into believing I had not seen what I thought. Some years later I stumbled upon a GIF on a shared tablet. It was shot in our very distinct bathroom, and showed my 14-year-old niece nude. I called police immediately, and he never came home again. He is currently in prison. That night he was staying at his parents'. Police were investigating. I realized his Gmail was logged in on another tablet we shared. I could see his search history in real time. When does CP become a federal offense? Can a not convicted sex offender see their kids? What's prison like in Virginia? Daddy going to jail? How do I get my wife to come back to me? Can you plead the fifth at custody court? Etc. I've always found it extremely unnerving that he could be so tech savvy on one side of things and so careless on the other. I hang around some shady people. The one that took it for me was a hardcore addict with multiple chemical compounds around his house he had no business having. He said he made them all himself. I know my chemistry, and they were all legit what they were labeled as he described how he made them, and it checked out. I've come to a point in my life where my philosophy is never to underestimate a drug addict. I've seen people at the bottom who are more intelligent in one or two things than I'd anticipate 90% of the global population. I was once helping my friend's mom run the daycare, and I was reading to a 9-month-old, and I noticed every time I read an item on the page, for example the frog jumped, she'd point at the frog. I eventually started making it harder and asking her where the ball is. It was another page. She'd turn the page back and show me the ball. I was pretty impressed, but I have no clue on development stages. I once watched my cousin with Down syndrome just start hitting golf balls at the range, like he was the course pro. He went to a few of my matches growing up, and occasionally I would take him to the range with me because he loved watching me hit them and riding in the cart if I played. One day he was messing with one of my wedges, and I offered him a couple balls. By no means was he sending these hundreds of yards, considering it's a pitching wedge, but every shot was practically identical to the one before. He was consistently hitting them 80 yards within what seemed like a 5-yard grouping. Since then, I've tried to get him to hit more balls, but he just doesn't want to. By far the most unexpected thing I've witnessed. I used to go to school with a genius dude. He was super shy and introverted, but his ability to solve complex issues had everyone ask for his help, and he eventually became a super quiet leader in our classroom. He would correct teachers left and right, score perfect grades, while everyone else was struggling. He photocopied his extremely clean notebook for everyone to use, solved the tests multiple times in multiple variations with errors, and passed it along the class for everyone to copy. Did a few people's final project for a fee in addition to his own. He carried us all through the toughest classes all, while staying extremely humble about his intellectual skills. Finished every semester with near perfect grades. We all looked up to him. What did he end up doing? Last I heard from past friends, he tried applying to a few high-paying jobs, but didn't make any of them due to lacking social skills. Ended up pursuing electrical engineering degree at the university, and he's still at it. Probably carrying more people at university lol. Dude is incredibly bright, and I expect his career to be good, but it could have skyrocketed so fast very early. If he wasn't so reserved. Had a dude in high school who was really intelligent. Could do advanced math easily, and didn't really need to study anything to be able to do it, just as well as me. He was also very manipulative, was involved in a lot of drama, and weird sexual things with other classmates. His father was just as bad, and I think he had daddy issues to be honest. He was the closest thing I've seen to a psychopath. Last I heard, he got a nickname Virgin Slayer, and he's a 25-year-old dude, so that creeps me the F out. Some people have this weird keen ability to predict danger just before it happens. Like for example, a woman I know stopped walking just before a flower pot fell from above, right in front of her. Another similar incident involving the same woman, she saved her child by grabbing him back just narrowly before a car would have hit him. She doesn't know how she does it, or why, it just feels very strange. It's when a timer kind of hyper observant guy kind of read me, like he knew me years and years. Kind of creepy for me, since I really don't like strangers knowing me, since I like being private. I was at this casual get together, chatting with random people, when this guy I'd never met before walked up and said, "You're a musician, aren't you?" I was caught off guard, but said I play the guitar. That's when it got weird. He smiled and said, "I figured. Your fingers are calloused in a way that only happens with string instruments, and it's been a long time since you've stopped because they've toughened evenly. And your posture? It gives away how much time you spend hunched over it." I just kind of stood there, stunned. I hadn't even been holding my hands in a way that would make the calluses obvious. The worst part? He said it so casually, like it was no big deal, to read someone like a book. I made an excuse to leave the conversation, but for the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd noticed way more about me than he let on. I still wonder how much he saw that he didn't say. Creepy. A very intelligent sociopath. Everything was calculated, and usually he was right. The reason I found out. One day we did mushrooms together and evidently the chemicals tore down some walls, and he told me that he manipulated me into our friendship. He had basically stalked me until he knew what I liked, and then pretended to like the same things. He said he does this with everyone. He studies them for a while from afar, figures out what makes them tick, and then exploits it, so he can get what he wants. It was terrifying. I don't know if this counts as intelligence, but last night I was working waiting tables, and I just had this hunch about a couple sitting in my section. Based on very limited information, I was able to guess how long they'd been together, where they met, and why, what the guy studied in college, and what industry the woman worked in. 5 out of 5 correct. Even I was a little creeped out. My mate guessed a cow's exact weight from a blurry photo at a pub quiz. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening. Tell your friends about me.